Welcome to Movies I've Seen. I'm Jackie Falco, and this is my podcast. This week, I talked with Sam about 3 movies that we both watched. Judy and Punch, The Losers, and Nosferatu, the Vampyre. I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and as always, if you have any comments that you want to share about the movies, you can contact the show at falcojackie@gmail.com. That's the show's email address. It's also one of my email addresses. And I'm on Twitter at falcojackie. I normally put this stuff at the end, but if you are enjoying the show, please rate it on whatever service you're listening to it on, and please share it. Thanks for coming to talk with me about some movies.
Thanks for having me back.
So we've got 3 movies to talk about today.
Yes.
The first of which is Judy and Punch.
That's the way to do it! His delivery on that line is infectious.
He's really good. Everybody's really good in the movie.
Yeah, everybody's great.
It's wonderful. So the classic children's play is Punch and Judy.
Mm-hmm.
And those are puppets. One's name is Punch and the other's name is Judy.
Correct. For the longest time, I always thought it was Punchin' Judy. Like, it was a person named Judy who was, like, a boxer. And I thought her name was Punchin' Judy. Like, I don't know.
I wish it was that.
Yeah, I had no familiarity with this.
As someone who has always loved puppets and continues to love puppets, I am familiar with the puppets Punch and Judy and their classic smack 'em up style show.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my favorite type of puppet show. I prefer more friendliness and less smashy, as they would say.
I was vaguely aware of the fact that there was 2 puppets, and there was a guy and a girl, and they had sticks, and they would, smack each other around. Like, I'd seen this in stuff. Like, they parody it in a lot of, like, kids' shows and movies.
I guess
and
that's true.
I'd seen them in things, like, just around. But I didn't know that there was, like, an official show or set of characters associated with this. I thought it was just, like, oh, that's what puppet shows used to be like,
So I don't know exactly how true the story is.
They added some stuff, obviously.
Well, it says at the beginning of the movie, this is loosely based on some potentially true events.
Mm-hmm.
I like a wording like that. So before I get into a whole diatribe about what my favorite puppets are
Mm-hmm.
and why they're the puppets from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
I would like to go over the plot of the movie
Sure.
and just sort of sell it to everyone.
Yeah.
And say, this is a no spoilers segment. Okay, so the plot of Judy and Punch is that there is a young married couple in a small, very crummy English town.
Yeah. It's not quite medieval. I would say it's Elizabethan period.
But rural, so gross.
Yeah. This is like redneck Elizabethan.
It really is. So this young married couple, they have a little baby and they live in kind of a big fancy house, and they have one very old servant, and her name is Maid in the film, and she has a husband and his name is Old Man in the film. The husband is a drunk and they are performing the puppet show together, and the wife Judy is like, please don't be drinking. Our show's just coming along really great. The scouts are maybe going to be here soon. It would be so good to get back on the road and back in the city, and you really ruined it all when you started drinking on the road.
He's much more obsessed with this than she is, though. She just likes doing the show. She's very good at it.
She's very good at it.
She loves entertaining people. She loves making people happy.
Yes.
And she honestly doesn't mind living in the town so much. She wishes things were different, obviously, because there's some pretty insidious shit going on. But
yes. And so one of the first big scenes is a scene of them doing the puppet show, and it's just lovely. Some of the best puppet work I've seen in a long time. Really great marionette puppets.
Yeah, 2 fists up. Would punch again.
So the plot really gets going when Judy says to her husband Punch, like that's their names in the film.
Punch and Judy is their names.
Everyone calls him Punch. Everyone calls her Judy. Those are their names.
Yeah. And we should also mention, like, people love their show.
It's
like,
very popular.
It blows people away. The whole town loves these guys. They are the town celebrities.
So then Stoning Day happens, which is one of the most upsetting things in a really upsetting movie.
Yeah. It's a delightful town tradition when someone is accused and convicted of witchcraft that they put them up on basically a gallows, and everybody in town chucks big fucking rocks at them until they're dead.
And this is how you know Punch is a celebrity, is because the town, like, meathead crier is like, hey, Punch, you want to cast the first stone?
Yeah.
And Punch is like, I'd be honored.
I'd be honored. And then he does it.
What a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it establishes very important stuff, because it establishes that this town is full of people that are just gluttons for violence. The way they respond to Punch's show is borderline inappropriate, but like it's fine because it's just a show. But then you see Stoning Day, and they're like, oh, these people like this stuff for real.
They're bloodthirsty.
They're just bloodthirsty.
They're a bloodthirsty mob.
Yeah.
They will lynch anyone for anything.
Yeah. And Judy doesn't want to partake. She drops the rock that somebody gave her and then walks away.
Yes.
So
the events that are to become get set in motion when Judy says, I'm going out to do some chores. You're in charge of watching the baby. They've got a 1-year-old baby, a little girl. And Punch is a drunk, aggressive, idiot moron. And he fails to care for the baby, follows a dog that steals his sausage into the other room of the house, and the old man is there, and he's like, oh, the dog doesn't mean nothing. Yeah.
Because it's just a dog that stole some sausage. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
You're rich, dude.
Here, have some
They'll just give you more
brandy.
sausage.
Yeah, they do have
It's so frustrating to watch Punch, because he's such
an asshole.
He's such a piece of shit.
Yeah, he's terrible.
But yeah, so the old man gets him to drink because he doesn't know any better.
The old man is very sweet. He has definitely dementia.
Yeah.
They didn't have Alzheimer's back then, but he just is like very in and out of reality and very sweet. I think one of the great ways that the filmmakers also show his dementia is by having him be well dressed all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like 8 a.m. he's in like an Elizabethan collar.
Yeah.
And
he's like, the maid is his wife.
Yes.
And he says to her, do I look good for any possible unexpected guests?
Yeah.
He just cares about stuff. And he likes everybody. And yeah, go ahead. So
he's very sweet and compassionate. And Punch comes in and yells at him about his dog. And he gives him some alcohol. And Punch gets drunk, continues to chase the dog. And he picks up the baby and takes it with him to chase the dog, and ends up accidentally throwing the baby out the second-story window of their home, and the baby dies, and it's very sad, but it is shot a little comically. Judy comes home a couple hours later, and she's like, where's the baby?
He just says, the old man got me drunk, he sucks, and it's, I blame him, and I accidentally dropped the baby out the window, and we should just move on with our lives. He literally just says, I think it's time to get on with our lives. And then she says, what do you mean you dropped the baby out the window? And he just repeats himself and says, it's time to move on with our lives. He's such a despicable piece of shit.
Yeah, he really is. And Judy freaks out, obviously.
Yeah.
And Punch then picks up his cane and beats her what looks like to death for being upset. And he takes her body to the woods and leaves her to die in the middle of the woods. But she does not die because even though she has severe intracranial bleeding, a little forest nymph of a girl in a weird cape has been following Judy around and watching her puppet show and thinking she's cool. And so she sees Judy left for dead in the woods, and she's like, oh no, but Judy's so cool. I'll have my other friends in the woods save her. And then we're introduced to this whole community of basically
gypsies.
Yeah, gypsies, witches.
They've been accused of witchcraft because, they do establish earlier in the movie too that Judy, in addition to knowing puppeteering, she also does magic tricks.
Close-up magic?
Close-up magic and stuff like that. She entertains a bunch of kids randomly. They're not even doing an official show. She just is in an alley hey kids, look at this trick with this dove. Whoa, there's a dove. Oh, I smashed the dove. Haha. And the kids are like, ah, ha, ha.
And so the hot constable walks up and is like, oh, hey, Judy, your magic's really cool, and I think you're really great and pretty, but be careful. Someone might think you're a real witch, but I don't think that, but other people might think that, and I hope you like my big, weird constable pants.
Yeah, so he's like this nice, sweet guy who lives in this town full of bloodthirsty morons, and he's just trying to do his best being the constable, but like nobody takes him seriously.
Well, he's newly appointed.
Yeah, I think the position is newly existing.
Yeah, this is a point in England where they are just beginning to instill some sort of police system.
It's a long way to Hot Fuzz.
Okay, so Judy gets beaten within inches of her life. This little sprightly girl saves her and brings her back to her gypsy community of witches and outcasts, and the medicine woman takes her into her beautiful, is it like a trailer?
Yeah, the gypsy buggy. That's what it is.
Yes. And it takes her a couple days to wake up, but eventually Judy wakes up and wanders out into the middle of the camp and tries to grab a weapon and falls over again.
Because she is not healed of her internal bleeding yet.
But she's got her heart set on revenge.
Yeah.
And while we would naturally, I like a revenge story.
Me too.
So we would naturally want Judy to go get some revenge. The revenge is necessitated in the plot by what's happening back in town, wherein Punch very easily frames the maid and the old man for the murder and disposal of the baby and Judy. He takes a tiny booty and puts it on the maid's stove and says, she ate my child. They murdered my wife and child.
They're witches!
Yeah.
Like, immediately accuses them of being witches, and...
And the nice constable with the weird pants comes over and he's like, well, let's find some evidence.
Yeah. And then Punch is like, what? We have no time for evidence!
So
they did it!
So to prevent an actual lynch mob, he takes the maid and the old man and puts them in a jail.
Yes. In his newly built jail.
And you can see that he doesn't think they did it.
Yeah, and he wants to do a proper investigation, and he, like, talks with them, and he clearly sees they're not capable of murder. And it's heartbreaking, because the maid is like, oh, no, don't take my husband, like, take me, but leave him alone. Like, it's heartbreaking.
I know!
And and the constable takes him into custody to protect them, and also, because he's got to do it, or his job is nothing.
Well, the town crier / meathead is the one who starts riling people up. He's a big fan of Punch, and he like is shouting at people as they're going through the market, like, these people eat children.
Yeah.
And the town meathead says to the ruffians who are sort of helping the constable, like, get a confession any way you can.
And then they do, and they announce the confession and the guilty verdict and the impending execution without even talking to the constable. And the constable's like, you guys should have talked to me about that first. And he's like, oh, well, we didn't want to bother you. We thought maybe you had some interior decorating to do.
Rude.
Yeah, it's extremely rude.
So we feel really strongly that we want Judy to live with the witches forever, but maybe just go back to town and get some revenge to prevent the nice old couple from being murdered.
Yes.
And it's close.
Yeah, it's really close.
But in the end...
Well, without getting into spoiler territory, the basic themes that are explored for the remainder of the movie are... Punch now has to contend with the fact that Judy was the brains of the operation.
Oh, that's delightful.
It really is.
Watching him squirm and... So he, like, enlists another woman in town to make him food and be his puppets, and it's...
Be his wife mother.
Yeah, and it's painful seeing the way he treats her.
Oh, yeah.
So she lets him do all this stuff and treat her so badly because she was a prostitute. And then he was like, you can move in my big house. I'll feed you and your 2 sons that are named like Pie and Pancake. So it's delightful to watch Punch struggle and fail. And then some scouts come to town and he totally fucks it up. And he's drunk and mean and stupid and his puppets suck.
And his puppet skills aren't great anyways. And then he can't teach the new woman to do it properly. Sure as hell not as good as Judy. And she's trying her best.
Yeah, she is.
And she keeps fucking it up because it's such short notice and all this stuff. And he like...
She's very likable, and that's one of the feminist things on the list of feminist things in this movie.
Yeah. And he starts slapping her around, and then he's like, let's dress your children up as puppets and pretend that we're puppeteering them. And you're like, what the hell are you doing? No one's going to believe this man.
Mm.
So he tries to do that, and it fails, and it's... So
the scouts walk out.
Yeah, he has to contend with not being as good as he thought he was, and realizing for the first time that Judy was the brains, and she was really the talent of the whole thing. Everyone loved the Punch and Judy show, but Judy was the heart of the show.
Yeah.
And Judy has to contend with the fact that getting revenge on him won't make any difference. It's just, that's the way the town is, and people are always going to believe him. And so even if she does go and kill him, like, that's not going to fix anything. It's not going to bring the baby back, and it's just going to get her in trouble, and then it's going to maybe cast some light on the fact that they've got some outcasts living on the outskirts of town who are quote-unquote witches.
Right.
And then...
that beautiful Viking-looking lady says they're going to think you're a witch. You're back from the dead.
Yep. Don't do revenge. There's life after what's happened to you. And then she sees that all around her. So you got this, like, thing to where Punch and Judy were together, and they were doing this thing that was trying to make it work. But then they split over this horrible thing that Punch did, and Punch he was responsible for the split. It's all him, and he ruins his own life.
Yes.
And obviously, guts part of Judy in the process by killing the baby on accident, but like he kills the baby.
Through negligence.
Right. And Judy's devastated by this, and this is like this metaphor for like divorce and like losing a child and stuff. Like, there's life after devastation. Don't go for revenge. Don't give up. Like, live.
Yes.
That's the best revenge, is living.
The whole movie is so rich. All right. Now I've got a list of very good things about the movie.
Yes.
I would like to say. Number one, it was kind of weird tonally, and that is a positive for me. It is a weird subject matter. Number two, the soundtrack was phenomenal. It was weird. What is that called? A weird theremin music. Just sounds like a bizarre magic circus carnival thing. It's exactly my kind of music. I loved all of it the whole time.
Yeah, it's the kind of music that would play during one of those puppet shows. Somebody standing off to the side cranking the box.
Yeah, I didn't hear an accordion, but an accordion could easily play that music. Mm-hmm. Great puppets is on my list.
Yeah,
really good looking puppets.
Because I mean, if you're gonna do a movie about the Punch and Judy show, you should probably have some good puppets.
Good puppets, yeah. Good puppets, good puppeteering. Really liked it. The feminist propaganda is high on my list. The movie is feminist propaganda in a good way. Mm-hmm. And here's all the ways that it's feminist. Number one, it has a female main character. Great job.
Yeah, Mia Wasikowska is captivating.
She's really great.
Yeah, I had seen that awful Alice in Wonderland movie that she was in, and I was like, man, she can't act. And then I saw her in this, and I was blown away. She really is like literally captivating in this role, and she's great. Her personality shines through. She looks like a normal person, unlike in that Tim Burton garbage.
Yeah.
When you let her be a person, she really shines through, and I really like her a lot. I want to see more of her stuff now.
Well, we can. I've got a couple movies with her in them lined up for us.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, more feminist points. When you mentioned how badly Judy was hurt by the death of her daughter, it made me think of the moment in the gypsy camp where she is kind of walking around the camp, just hanging out, and there's a woman breastfeeding her child there, and Judy stands near her and sort of like looks wistfully at the child, and just like a regular like change of angle, you see the woman breastfeeding from a side view, mm-hmm. and you see the child like unlatch and then latch back on.
Yeah, the kid's just like hanging out, giggling, and it's just this normal thing.
It's beautiful and like, great.
Yeah. I couldn't believe they got that shot. And
I feel like I've never seen anything like that in a movie.
yeah, no.
That was feminism in action.
They normalize this thing that's stigmatized so often in other types of media.
Yes, exactly. Another feminist thing, like I mentioned earlier, was how the film treats the woman who ends up becoming Punch's girlfriend, formerly a prostitute. She is made very sympathetic. She has nice, normal dialogue where she's just trying to be sweet. The actress that plays her is pretty.
Yeah, she's pretty. She's got a good, like, strong personality to her that really shines through.
Her identity in the town is pre-established, and this comes back to bite her in the ass to the movie's benefit, in my opinion, because, I mean, I know the movie did this on purpose, but I liked it so Judy used to rile the crowd up and then introduce the show, and so Punch doesn't know how to do it, and so he
needs somebody else to do it for him, and
right.
He enlists her.
So the girlfriend woman is out front at first, trying to rile the crowd up to introduce the show, and there's a very loud heckler in the audience who knows her from the whorehouse that she used to work at, and he is very rude, and he keeps saying very rude and disgusting things to her, and she, to her credit, stays on stage and she gets meek and shy and quiet and very embarrassed, understandably.
Yeah.
And the rest of the crowd is laughing at his heckles because they're a bloodthirsty, awful crowd.
Yeah.
And she just braves through it, and I was so proud of her.
Yeah.
And that's feminism. Having weak women go through hard stuff and
just do it anyway.
Like, that's real.
And then she gets into a fist fight later with the crowd.
She sure does. And she does great punching.
She whips ass. Last we see her, she is winning that fight.
Yeah, she is. So the climax of the feminism in the movie is the climax of the film when Well,
there's this really cool, like, the way they handle the pacing is amazing too, isn't it? Because there's this convergence of sorts of building up to the moment where you're gonna have to make a choice. Because Judy becomes aware of the fact that the maid and her husband have been arrested. And the gypsies and outcasts that she's living with are getting ready to move camp. So they're like, you come with us. Live with us. We like you.
Yeah.
And she's like, this place is great. I really would like to come with you. But I have to do something. So she has to, like, make this choice of, like, do I go and take this new life that I've got? Or do I go and try to save these people that I care about and who are very
raised
nice.
her.
Who raised her. And she has to figure out a way to try to make both things work.
And so she, like, off camera, decides with the witches to...
So yeah, it comes down to the wire where she has to, like, make that choice and try to figure out a way to make both things work, if at all possible. And we won't say whether or not it does work, but it's pretty grueling getting to that point.
And feminist.
And Judy has to use all of her wits and all of her skills to try to figure out what to do. And everybody's got to make choices down to the very, very last moment.
So, highly recommend Judy and Punch. It's on Hulu right now. Would you recommend?
Oh, absolutely, I'd recommend. Go watch it right now. I mean, finish listening to the podcast, obviously. Then go watch it right now.
Pause it.
Yeah, you can come back to it. It's fine. You downloaded it already.
Okay. The next movie we're going to talk about is called The Losers.
Oh, God. Must we, though?
It was so bad, and we are just going to talk about how terrible it was. It wasn't, there's some good parts. It was real trash from beginning to end. And I know my weaknesses as a person.
This is about JDM.
The only reason I watched this was because it had so many actors I liked in it.
That was why, like, I had heard about how bad the movie was.
I didn't. I just stumbled across it one day and thought, look, I like all those actors. I wrote them down. Idris Elba, Chris Evans, Zoe Saldana, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Okay,
yeah.
Well,
Chris Evans does the best he can with what he's got. Jeffrey Dean Morgan somehow has this amazing superpower where any line that he says, you believe it. And
he's very charming.
Yeah, and Idris Elba just seemed bored.
He seemed bored, enthusiastic, and his accent kept slipping. Like, a lot.
Oh, yeah, a lot.
I have never seen it happen so much.
Yeah. And we know he can do an American accent because, like, he was in The fucking Office.
Was that in 2010?
I don't remember what year Charles Minor showed up on The Office, but he is on The Office doing an American accent, and he's pretty good at doing an American accent.
He does a pretty good, like, Northeastern accent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Here's all the problems with The Losers. It was a 2010 movie, and it felt so 2009.
It felt like 2003.
It was like...
The hyper-stylized editing, the cool graphic t-shirts, Chris Evans' goatee, like...
Oh my god.
I know that the characters were designed this way in the comic, so, like, I can't blame the filmmakers necessarily, but it's...
Yes, you can.
I said it while we were watching it, and it felt like Andy Diggle wrote the comic, and probably had a hand in designing the characters.
I keep forgetting this was based on a comic.
Yeah, and I said it while we were watching, it's like Andy Diggle really, really wanted to write a Brian Michael Bendis comic, but didn't know how.
Yeah, basically. That's what it seems like. Because it has the, like, self-loathing and sarcastic tone of a Bendis book, but without the heart or competence.
Mm-hmm. Also, the characters all suck.
Do they not make movies about the comics I like?
I mean...
They made a Barbarella movie a long time ago.
That was a long time ago.
It was not based on the comics.
Also, you don't like the comics from that period, do you?
No. I
There
like
you
the
go.
current comics.
Yeah.
About space travel.
Yeah.
And fighting fascism.
And red jumpsuits and bubble helmets.
Yeah.
Yeah. Smash the space patriarchy.
Exactly. Thank you for getting it. Anyway, I made a list of all the things I hated. Number 1, simple/lazy plot. A simple plot is not always bad, but if you have a simple plot, you have to have other things in your movie, like really nice cinematography, really good characters, just like some quality, something to be invested in.
Yeah. And
this plot was just a straight line of a place I didn't care about to another place I didn't care about, and I didn't care about any of the people that were going.
Yeah. When you have a simplistic plot like this, it should just be character driven. And on paper, maybe the comic's good. Because the stuff we hated was the performances were terrible, the dialogue was bad, and
the cheesy editing.
The cheesy editing was the worst. Maybe the comic is good. I'll check it out sometime.
I won't.
But
I also wrote weak characters and stupid.
Yes. They're archetypes. They're not characters. They don't have any... They have personality, but it's just archetype personalities. They don't actually have any real personality of their own.
Everyone gets 2 traits.
They gimmick.
Everyone has 2 traits and a gimmick.
Yeah.
And if you're Jeffrey Dean Morgan and the star of the film, you get a 3rd trait, which is sometimes you want people to call you Colonel, and sometimes you don't.
Yes.
And
then you have a cringy romantic subplot with Zoe Saldana.
That was one of the worst sex scenes I've ever seen. And I've seen The Room. That was terribly edited. It was terribly placed. Like, it doesn't make... If those characters who were romantically interested in one another had sex at basically any other time in the movie, besides following the scene where Zoe Saldana reveals that she betrayed all of them for her own personal gain, and that's when they had sex. He was like, I don't care that you betrayed me. I'll have sex with you anyway. And then she betrays them again.
Yeah, and you could have done something with that dynamic where, like, she just, like, comes to his room and he's like, you betrayed all of us and I hate you. And she's like, that's okay. I hate you also. But do you want to have sex? And he could have been like, I mean, sure, but I still hate you. Like, you can do that dynamic and, like, have it be funny.
Yes.
Like, yeah, it would be funny and kind of quirky or whatever, like,
but then
have
don't
2 people...
shoot it in weird super slow-mo tableau.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense.
I felt so bad for her.
And they tried to make it like a character thing. Like, oh, the Colonel. He's always letting women...
Sucker for the babes.
And I guess there's some truth to that, because at a terrible moment, he does have sex with this woman who just betrayed him. So it does seem, now that I'm thinking about it outside of being angry at the movie, it does seem like they tried to pay that off.
Yeah.
Of like, he does have bad taste in women, and he is always doing the wrong thing for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, but there's no arc to that eventually.
There's no consequence of him having sex with her in that moment, besides they then have a fight scene in his bedroom with her in her underwear instead of another room, because they were going to have that fight with her anyway.
Yep.
So...
But she got to shoot the mirror ceiling down and distract everybody so she could escape.
They didn't even use the mirror ceiling in the sex scene.
Nope.
Mistake. I don't know how much I can talk about how terrible this annoying movie that literally no one has seen.
Well, if you want to expedite this process, I would say let's talk about the things that we didn't hate. Like I said earlier, I thought Chris Evans did the best he could with what he had. He's a very charming person in general, so you want to laugh at his jokes. And the scene with him and the sniper where he telekinetically kills those guys.
That was funny.
That was pretty funny.
That was a
I
good
would have
gag.
liked to see a movie with just those two guys.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Pulling a heist or something. Like, that was fun, and that was the closest we got to, like, an actual dynamic. Because one guy talks a lot, the other guy doesn't talk at all, and that's kooky partners. Like...
Yeah.
Yeah, that was at least something.
Am I supposed to say a thing I liked?
Yeah, that you didn't hate. You didn't. This doesn't have to be something you liked. Just like something like, oh, well, I guess I'm glad that was in there.
I didn't hate that Chris Evans had a strong passion for his niece's girls' elementary soccer team.
Yeah, I think he should have punched out that ref at the end, though.
I think so, too.
That would have been so funny.
Yeah, but I didn't hate that. And I guess it goes without saying that I didn't hate Jeffrey Dean Morgan in this. He was fine. He had a slight beard.
That's how much beard he usually has.
Some heavy 5 o'clock shadow.
Yeah, it's just his state of being.
It looked nice. That's it. And it couldn't end soon enough. I hated that stupid fucking movie.
I think I dozed off towards the end of the movie because the action, like the big climactic action scene at the end, I think I fell asleep at one point during it. I didn't care.
It was real stupid.
Idris Elba's a traitor. He screws them over and gets them captured, and then they have to have a fight.
Yeah, but also you're like, I kind of understand why you did that, because they were asking unreasonable things of you. They were like, we know you're back in America and you're supposed to be dead and we're preventing you from going to see your family. Can you just stay and maybe go on a suicide mission to kill this guy who was the reason this woman's father died?
Yeah, and it's like, again, you could do something with that, because it's like, this starts out as a thing where, like, so the setup is that they're a special ops team that works for the CIA, and they go to paint a target for an airstrike for somebody that works at the CIA. They paint the target. Oh no, the drug dealer's compound has some children in it because they're using children as drug mules. That sucks. This is a bad guy. Wait, we gotta call off the airstrike. Oh, they won't call off the airstrike. Well, we gotta go in and save those kids. So they run in and save the kids. They get him out on a school bus. It's an entertaining enough scene.
I mean, it's stupid, but it's fine.
So they get him out of there. They put him all in a helicopter, and they're like, "Oh, Colonel, we don't have the room on the chopper for you and your team now." And he's like, "That's fine. We'll make our own way out." Chopper takes off. The guy who called in the airstrike anyway calls in an airstrike on the helicopter, kills 25 children in front of them, and tried to kill them. So now they're pretending to be dead so that nobody can find them.
Right.
Okay, so that's the setup of the movie. And you could do it where the Colonel wants revenge and the others all just want to go home. And then over the course of the movie, he starts getting driven more towards revenge, and they're along for the ride because they want to go home, and that's their only way to get home is to take out this guy. Then, maybe there's a point in the movie where they could just walk away and let it go. But then it turns out that the bad guy's got these super weapons of death that he's going to unleash on random people for fun or for profit. And they're like, okay, well, now if we walk away, we're basically letting this guy commit genocide.
Right.
So it's our moral obligation to step in and do something because, oh, I have a niece that I've established that I really care about because I'm the fun uncle and I really love my niece and I love her stupid soccer games that she plays in. And the other guy is a father. He's going to be a father soon. So like, yes. Oh, well, even if my kid doesn't get killed in one of these attacks, like, what kind of world am I welcoming this child into? You could do something with these elements and make a good movie out of it.
They just made a bad movie out of it.
They did nothing.
They dissipated all tension at any moment possible, and I hated it. It was really, really bad.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very annoyed even talking about it.
Yeah, it's not just a bad movie, because you can watch a bad movie and have like a good time watching it.
I sure can.
But like, holy shit, this was an infuriatingly bad movie because it could have been good. They had so many parts to make a good movie, and they just didn't.
They did the worst job they possibly could.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that's it. That was The Losers. Bleh.
But
Okay, and then the next movie that we watched, which was also weird, was Nosferatu the Vampire, which was
directed by Werner Herzog.
Directed by Werner Herzog, starring Klaus Kinski, and it was a soft reboot. Just kidding. It was a remake of the original Nosferatu.
And Dracula simultaneously.
Yeah. The original Nosferatu wasn't technically about Dracula. It was about Count Orlok and some... Yeah, go ahead.
So, this guy named Murnau, a director in Germany in the 1920s, wanted to make a film adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And his widow wouldn't sell the studio or him the rights to use it. Like, wouldn't let them use the story. So in order to circumvent that, he just changed the name of the vampire to Count Orlok and changed the location and all the character names and thought they could get away with that. They didn't, by the way. Bram Stoker's...
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't tell you this. Bram Stoker's widow, like, found out and sued them and won, and she took possession of the movie and ordered all the prints to be destroyed. Some of them were missed, though, and that's how the movie ended up getting rediscovered decades later.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
I feel like that should have been in Shadow of the Vampire. No, that movie was chock full.
They had a lot going on in that movie. And Werner Herzog comes in, and he made that movie the year that Dracula became public domain.
Okay, so he was chomping at the bit.
Yes. And he decided to complete, because I read the Wikipedia on this, and he apparently regards Nosferatu as like the greatest movie to ever come out of Germany, and wanted to basically complete Murnau's work by having it be the Dracula adaptation that Murnau wanted it to be.
That's very noble.
It is, I guess, but also...
It didn't come out great.
No.
I would say, overall, I'd give it a C. I would give it a C for effort. I would give it an A for cinematography and shot composition.
I think that the editing would drop it down a letter grade, though.
Well, the editing gets a D.
Yeah.
The editing is very bad. And I'm not a movie editor. I feel like I'm always complaining about editing these days. I'm not an editor, but I know that a 8-second long shot of a house is maybe too long for a static establishing shot of a location we've actually already been inside of.
Yep.
Just a thought.
Maybe in a shot where you're having your main characters bid each other goodbye, don't have a horse's ass sticking out in the foreground of your shot. Either move the horse out of the frame or turn it around so that its head is in the shot.
Either one of those things. So I really liked a lot of things about Nosferatu the Vampire. Number one, Klaus Kinski is a delight. I know I haven't seen all of his movies, but he is a full-on raging psychopath of a man.
Mm-hmm.
And he was great in this. If anyone wants to know anything about the story of the making of Nosferatu, I cannot recommend the film Shadow of the Vampire enough. It stars John Malkovich in his Malkovichist best ever, and
at his Malkovichiest.
At his Malkovichiest. I like that rhymes with bitchiest. And Willem Dafoe plays the vampire, and that's all I'm gonna say. It's not... Shadow of the Vampire is not a fast-moving action movie.
Nope.
But it is a incredibly hilarious, rich, historical-ish drama comedy. And it gets better every time you watch it.
Yeah. Just the performances of the two main characters alone are enough to warrant watching the movie. But there's everything else in there is a delight.
So, things I want to say some nice things about Nosferatu the Vampire. I really liked the dinner scene where Jonathan Harker cuts his finger with the bread in his hand, and Dracula's there, and he's like, oh, that knife is old and dirty, it could be poisoned, and he like reaches out for his hand. He wasn't gonna suck this dude's blood, but he cut his own finger, so I guess he's asking for it. And Harker's like, I don't think you should know. And
don't put my finger in your mouth, please.
And Dracula just goes for it. I'm really about to call him Orlok. And Dracula just goes for it, and the way it's shot from like over the shoulder and down the table, and Harker like backs up and stumbles backwards, and Dracula like almost floats over the chair, like climbs over the chair easily to get to him.
Yeah, he like hurls it out of the way, and he's like coming at him, and you're like, what? And then he's like, let's sit down and talk a while.
But like
by the fire.
The handheld 35mm camera backs up and goes into another room where the lighting is already preset and these actors hit their fucking marks. So Harker is in the warm light of the fireplace, and they have some ice cold literal limelight from somewhere off camera on Dracula's face. And so he's in the foreground of the shot, lit like ice. He looks like stone. And Harker's on the left hand of the frame, like slightly in the background, and he looks warm on the yellow fire and also terrified, and he's bleeding, and it is beautiful.
Yeah, it's really like, this is a testament to Werner Herzog as a filmmaker. Is he in this shot, he goes from this like really tense, what's gonna happen, into this scene where it's just like this, it's a metaphor, it's a visual metaphor for these two characters. Harker is alive and vulnerable, and the warmth of the fire is a brief respite from the terror he's experiencing, and Dracula sits across from him, and the warmth of that fire does not touch him because he's dead.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and was definitely, that scene was my favorite part of the movie. But there's a ton of stuff like that in the movie. That's, the lighting is the best lighting I've ever seen, and it's just so deliberate and cool. It's so there's not a lot of handheld stuff like this.
Not in the 70s.
No, 1979 this came out. I can't imagine that these low budget filmmakers had light cameras, so they were lugging these. Was it shot on 35mm?
But there was handheld camera stuff at that point. The 60s were really the last time when you had like these big gigantic cameras. They had a lot more mobile ones. They didn't have steady cams yet, so yeah,
right.
It takes a lot of effort to do it, but like, you could do it. It's just, it wasn't done because it wasn't as efficient and it was easier to screw up.
Well, there were a lot of mistakes. Like, they obviously shot in a historical home that the plaque was not removed from the front of.
Plaque off the front.
It was a real low budget movie. Like, no shade. You do what you gotta do to get your movie made. But it was rough.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what year this is set in.
It's Victorian era.
Early Victorian?
Yeah, I mean, it's
like,
set during the era that Dracula the book takes.
Can I just say, like, I was looking at all the locks on the doors, and I was like, are those Victorian era locks? They look pretty 20th century. But, just, we're not changing any locks on doors for this movie.
Nope.
We will shoot.
We're on a BBC budget here, bitches. You'll just pretend.
Yeah. And I was happy to.
Absolutely. I agree. I'm on board.
I mean, I will nitpick a movie or something when I'm already not having a good time. And there was a ton.
If the movie makes its purpose to be historically accurate, like, they don't ever say what year it is. They don't seem to give a shit what year it is.
No.
It's just a story that happens at some point when the plague is a problem.
Right.
Like, who cares what year it is?
That could be now.
Yeah. We watch the Hammer Dracula movies and we love those.
Yes.
Those are not historically accurate to jack shit. But we don't care.
I know. I just wanted to, like, defend my acceptance and, like, not being nitpicky in this, because sometimes I am when I'm already in a bad mood.
Yeah.
And I don't know what sets it off.
I I support your lack of nitpickery in this.
I generally don't care about historical accuracy. I think I made that clear on the Iron Jawed Angels episode.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there are large swaths of this movie that are very boring.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that a movie can be boring and also great. Like, I like fucking Blade Runner, and Blade Runner is boring as shit. Boring sci-fi is amazing sometimes, and boring horror can also be amazing sometimes too, because if you have atmosphere and you've got, some engaging cinematography, you're golden. But there's nothing really driving this movie except for that Werner Herzog wanted to replicate some shots from Nosferatu that he really liked.
Well, he really did a great job.
He did. He can't say that he didn't do that.
I wonder if it would be possible to watch this movie not knowing the story of Dracula, if that would add any suspense. But I've seen Dracula and read Dracula and heard Dracula so many times that I'm like, yeah, I get it. Okay, he's a vampire. Move on to the next thing. But this movie did something different, and Lucy helped defeat Dracula this time.
Even though they got the character names wrong again.
And Van Helsing was a bitch. I wrote that on my list.
Yes, he sure was. This is actually a thing I want to talk about a little bit, if that's okay. Frequently in adaptations of the story of Dracula, they interchange the names a lot. Dr. Seward and Dr. Van Helsing are switched a lot. Mina and Lucy are switched a whole bunch of times.
I thought Lucy was the friend.
Lucy is the friend.
And Mina's the wife.
Mina is Jonathan's fiance.
Okay, but that's not what happened in this movie.
No, for some reason they use Lucy as the main character's name, and Mina is like... Oh, Mina dies. She's the girl who gets killed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. She's the friend, and she dies. Yeah, they switch those characters, even though the characters are nothing like they are in the book or other adaptations. They do that a lot with Dracula stories, and I get it for, like, the Hammer movies. They streamline the cast. I'm a fan of Quincy Morris, but they usually omit him entirely from it because 3 different guys wanting to marry Lucy at the same time is a little much for a short movie adaptation. I get it. It's fine. Get rid of one of the others. Quincy should stay. But that's just me. So that happens in this as well, but the fact that they made the female love interest of Dracula the driving force of the second half of the movie, you're right. That's a very unique idea.
It was cool.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see Lucy, like, ask Van Helsing for help and for him to be like, oh, I can't believe you're believing this. And she's like, what? You saw this too, dude? And she's
then she has that moment where she realizes, like, oh, you're not going to help me. Okay, you can leave now. I'll handle this.
Yeah.
And she kicks him out of the house. Like,
yeah. What a boss.
Yeah.
So Lucy does a great job, and then she has this real cool scene where Lucy read the Transylvanian book that one of the Transylvanians gave to Jonathan Harker, and he brought it home, and she read it, and the book says that Dracula can only be killed when he is tricked into feeding on a maiden until
pure of heart.
Until dawn. And so she's like, oh, I'm a maiden. I can do that. I can take a bite. And in the meantime, her urgency to do this is not just to save her fiance, which I guess she cares about some, but also she's like, the whole town is collapsing.
Because Dracula brought plague rats with him.
He brought plague rats, and he's also killing people.
Yeah.
And actually, we see so many caskets, and the movie doesn't tell us how many he's killing versus how many are plague. And the peasants in town aren't going to know the difference.
Nope.
Like, people are dying. It's plague, whatever.
Well, that's another part that's kind of bizarre, too, is Van Helsing does point out that when they find Mina dead,
yeah,
he's like, oh, it's not the plague. That much is for sure, because Dracula killed that one. So, like, is the movie telling us that Van Helsing does know the difference and he just isn't doing anything about it? Like, I don't know. I really hated Van Helsing in this movie.
He was awful, and his haircut was terrible.
Yeah.
It was real bad. So Lucy is incensed and driven to save her town, and so...
And no one will listen to her, so she's got to do it herself.
She entices Dracula to her bedside and has her neck all bare, and he bites her, and he falls asleep biting her, and he wakes up and he's gonna leave, and it's still dark out, and she's like, no, bite me again. And he does it, and then it's daylight.
The rest of the night, and then the cock crows, just like the book says.
Yeah.
If she makes him forget about the crow of the cock, he will be destroyed by the dawn's first light.
Yeah. She gets him. Sun comes up. He curls up into a ball in the corner of the room. And then Helsing comes in and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, Van Helsing comes in and he's like, oh, I got this wooden stake and a hammer. I guess I'm going to sledgehammer the stake into his heart. And it happens off screen because I guess they didn't have the budget to do it.
I don't know. I think they were trying to be... Because they showed Jonathan's reaction to it, and Jonathan is at this point turning into a vampire. So they showed Jonathan's reaction to it happening.
Did that happen in the book? Did Harker turn into a vampire in the book?
That did not happen in the book.
I like that.
Lucy is the only one that gets turned into a vampire in the original book. Mm-hmm. I'm fairly certain, anyway.
She's the friend in that one, not the wife.
Yes. Dracula goes for her first because she's the one who's, like, you know, sexually active and, like, you know...
Available.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah, because he can't have Mina yet, and he wants to take his time with her, but he needs instant gratification, so he goes for Lucy first.
You sluts will learn a lesson.
But that's not... Okay, I want to say, though, that's not how Bram Stoker paints it, because, like, he doesn't paint Lucy as this, like, you know, painted whore. Like, she's just... That's her character. And the three men that like her, like, they're all very civil with one another. They're like, oh, yeah, I get it. We have to compete for this because it's worth it. Duh. Best man win. And then after she dies, they're like, let's get this fucker for killing her. Yeah. Like, yeah, it's, you know,
it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's not anti, like the book doesn't hate women and the movie doesn't either.
I hope that the goths won't throw me out for saying this, but I don't really like the book of Dracula. It's all letters. I don't really like it.
Well, it was a groundbreaking way of doing a horror story at the time. So that's really where it comes from. I get it, though. You have to like a certain aesthetic. You don't really like novels in general.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's hit or miss with you.
Yeah, it's not really my kind of book. Okay, so that's all I have to say about Nosferatu the Vampire. I would recommend it, but mostly for visuals.
Just go watch Shadow of the Vampire.
And we should go watch Shadow of the Vampire right
and
now.
Then we'll do an episode about it.
And then we'll do an episode about it because the title of this podcast is Movies I've Seen. So I just come in here and I talk about all the movies that I've watched. Mm-hmm. I mean, all the movies I've seen. Thanks for talking about all these movies with me.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks for listening. It's been a real pleasure talking about all of these movies, even if it wasn't a pleasure watching them. I hope that you enjoy your whole week and subscribe.